This week's episode has been sponsored by Oh My Bod, shifting the evolution of pleasure. Hi, this is Suzanne, and you're listening to Sex Advice for Seniors. God, today's very exciting because I've got somebody that is coming at us all the way from Washington, D.C. And I said, I'm just not even going to go there because what's the point of talking about sex even when you've got someone who's in the heartland of chaos? But anyway, enough of that. That's all I'm going to say. She's in Washington. She's freaking out like the rest of us. It's all fine. Renée Yvonne is a sex certified counselor, and I love the name of her business, which is the Gen Sexologist. So she helps Gen Xers and baby boomers reignite the spark in their relationship, rediscover intimacy, passion, and pleasure. And I know that this is going to be so familiar to so many people that are currently navigating sexless relationships, because I hear from so many people that are currently trying to do that. Low libido, same old in the bedroom. And she helps them try and create more playful, more practical, more heartfelt, more wonderful solutions so that they can get out of the rut that they were in and just have a really good time in the sack, or in my case, on a deserted beach in the Grand Canaries. Why not, right? As I learned, why not? It was actually quite uncomfortable. I wouldn't, if you want to reignite your intimate life, going to a rocky beach with lots of pebbles on the ground and stuff, if you're 64 years old, it's not that great an idea. It sounds good, but it's not. Anyway, I know that you have, Renée, so welcome. I know that you have some experience yourself of navigating this whole circumstance around sexless relationships. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
And that's actually how I got started in this business. So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, Suzanne. So I started out, I was in a relationship with somebody for about 6 years, and it was a sexless relationship. I always like to tell people sexless is defined as 10 or fewer times per year. It's not like never having sex, but it's definitely not having enough sex. And I didn't know what was going on because as women, I think we're taught that men always want sex. And so when your partner doesn't want it, you're like, what's wrong with me? Something must be wrong with me. So I was taking all of these classes. I was running around taking classes on like, how to have an orgasm and blowjobs and, cock worshiping. Like I was just all over the place. I was taking all kinds of classes. And I would keep coming back to him, like eager to show him what I learned. And he just didn't seem to care. And I was like, what? This is insane. So I started going to this women's group, and I finally kind of admitted what was going on because it was embarrassing. I was like, I don't know what's happening, but let me share this with somebody. And it turned out there were quite a few women in the group that were going through the same thing. Women don't talk about it the way men talk about it. Like men are like, I haven't had sex in 6 days. I'm going to find somebody, Whereas women are like, I don't know what's going on, and maybe it's me. And so, and talking about it and just kind of listening to the women, I realized this was a huge issue. And I decided to go back to school. But in the process of that, I talked to my partner and while I was in school, and I realized that one of the things we hadn't done was communicated about our wants, needs, and desires. I never talked about it. I just assumed he wanted sex as much as I did.
Yeah.
And it turned out he just didn't. And his the reasoning was he was suffering from depression and had been for a couple of decades, and he'd been on a medication that was lowering his sex drive. And he never considered that was it, and neither had I.
Wow.
And so even though I'd worked in pharmacy and I knew this, I never put that together. And so in that, we had that discussion, but I realized, like, after we talked, I said, you know what? He's never going to meet me here, and I can't keep trying to meet him here. This isn't going to work. And so we partied. Like we're still nice to each other. Like we don't hang out, but it's not the type of thing where we're like, I can't stand you because you left me. We had to really just come to grips with it and say, we're not sexually compatible in this way. So, but it does, it's one of those things that, it affects you emotionally and mentally because you're just thinking something's wrong with me. I don't know what's going on and I don't know how to get my partner involved. And so it can be very, demoralizing in a lot of ways when your partner doesn't want you sexually.
Yeah, and I think that, as you said, look, when I eventually stopped having sex with my husband, I got divorced a long time ago, but part of the reason why I did that was because I just didn't feel, like you said, that he could meet me where I wanted to be, and his discomfort around sex and my lack of discomfort ultimately collided, right? And we didn't talk at all. Like you said, we didn't have any communication about it. So eventually, when things kind of boiled over, and I just said, look, this isn't working anymore. And we actually started having a discussion. I realized this guy, I didn't know him at all in an intimate way. I didn't really understand what was going on in his brain. Like you said, we just didn't talk about that stuff. And I think, as you said, that's a super common experience for people, especially when they're younger and they're with somebody for a significant period of time. As long as the parts are kind of fitting together and it's all working, you're like, oh, this is good, right? I'm not going to ask you about your fantasies. I'm not going to ask you if you've got a preference for one gender or another. You seem to be into me at the moment. So I'm just going to assume that, you're a heterosexual person or whatever. When they might have completely different ideas going on in their heads, completely different, right? But yeah, so, you went off, you become a certified sex counselor. That seems like quite a big, what were you doing before then? Was it something totally different?
Transportation. I still work in transportation.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And I love it. Like I do this. It works out perfectly because most of the people I have to meet with, they meet in the evening. So I'm like, I can have my day job and then I'll do all the fun stuff at night. And they're both fun jobs. So, so I work in transportation, and I got into this and I really enjoy it. Like it's awesome. The talks I get to give, the counseling I get to do with people it's life-changing for so many people. And that's one of the things I like.
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned the shame and the embarrassment that you felt. So how do you think other people can overcome those feelings to talk about their challenges?
And so when I'm working with couples, I'm always amazed, and I don't know why, because I was in a relationship and didn't do it either, but I'm always amazed at couples who haven't talked to each other about what their fantasies and desires really are. And so there's a couple of things I do in session with people. One of them is I have a yes, no, maybe list, and they each take it. There's different levels to it, like some are more vanilla than others. But I have them go through the list and they go through this list of sexual activities and they choose yes, I would do this, no, I wouldn't, maybe I could be, and then whether they would rather give or be the giver or the receiver of that activity. And then I bring them back together and they go through the list and they're always surprised. Like they're like, I didn't know you wanted to try that, or I didn't know you would like to do that. And so it's a great way to get them to talk without getting them to have that conversation that feels so heavy. The other thing I do, and I love to do this is a whole session by itself, but I do something called, the name has changed, but when I first started, it was called the Graphic Sex Project. It was designed by a woman named Jennifer Beeman, and it's now called Biographs. But there are these little blocks, and they each color, there's 7 to 10 different colors. Each block can stand for something, whatever you want it to be. So it could be, this is oral sex, this is intercourse, anal sex, foreplay, touching, kissing. So you name each block, and then you build out this kind of like art installation of what you want sex to look like or what you don't. So sometimes I'll have a couple come together and I say, map out, I'll explain the whole thing. I'm like, map out a sexual experience you had that you never want to have again. And then they do that, and they're like, there was no foreplay. It was just straight, straight to the sex. There's no cuddling, and then they come together, and their partners learn, like, oh, we did that yesterday, and she, and then I have them do one, and I say, okay, let's do this. Like, tell me a sexual experience that would be your dream experience, and then they do that. And so it may be like, I want a lot of foreplay, a lot of kissing. I wish there was more massaging, more touching. I want to be flogged. I want you to, I want more anal sex. Like, and they find out, again, without having that deep conversation, they find out what their partner would really like to have. And now they have this like roadmap of it. It's like, oh, okay, this is what they're looking for. But again, we don't tend to have those conversations. We just kind of assume that we know what people want, or we're doing it based on like the last partners we had. I've definitely heard men say like, all the women I've been with, love having sex with me, and I make them all have orgasms. I'm like, that is just not true.
Bullshit.
I'm not trying to bust your bubble. That's just not true. Like, there's no way that's happening.
Like you said, a lot of it is about how we can do this without attributing blame to the other person, without making them feel ashamed. And as you said, just open up the conversation. I've heard about the tick boxing, like, yes, maybe, perhaps, no, list before. But I think I always think what a great tool, because it opens your mind to possibilities. It tells you what is definitely off the table, right? And you haven't had to have that discussion, which is like, no, fuck off. I'm never doing that. Right? You don't have to say it. It's like, it's on the list. It's a hard no. And a hard no is a hard no. That's it. So I think for me, those sorts of tools that mean that we don't have to actually talk too much about it to start with, but opens up the conversation, are really great. And, look, there are lots of people that are going through sexless relationships. How do you help to support people that are going through sexless relationships? Because as you said yourself, there's a lot of shame around that.
It's a lot of shame. So there's several conversations that we have to have. So the first one is, I want to find out, I'm not a doctor, so I want to find out, is this something medically going on? Like, are we not having sex because of, is there an illness? Is it chronic pain? Are you going through menopause and you need your hormones adjusted? What's happening there physically? So sometimes it's that. The other one is, there may be some built up resentment, and people aren't having sex because of that. And people underestimate that. Like, I'll talk to couples, and sometimes, one partner thinks they're doing a ton of stuff in a relationship, and the other one is like, I'm exhausted at the end of the day. Like, I just don't, I'm not having sex with you because I don't love you. I don't have anything left to give. So sometimes it has to be like, what can this person take off their plate to make this sex easier? Sometimes it hurts. Pain, and they don't know how to overcome that. It could be that they need lube. It could be that they need dilators to open up the vaginal canal more, to make it easier for intercourse. And then sometimes, you have to say that sometimes they're just bored. Like, for most men, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, most men are having an orgasm no matter what. Women, it's like I might not. And so if I know that every time I go into this, it's the same thing. He's going to kiss me here. He's going to pinch my nipples. He's going to rub me on my clit. He's going to slide in. 3 seconds later, it's over. Like, what am I getting excited about? Like, I can't get excited about that when I know that's the same thing every single time we have sex. There's no variety to it. So sometimes it's just straight boredom. And I know that's hard for some people to hear, because they think, they're like, I'm doing it. Like, she's like, yeah, you doing it. Like, you're laying there like, I got this.
I mean, I suspect as well, going back to the libido thing, it kind of depends on how much of a priority this is in your life, right? I mean, it's not just men who, people sort of assume that men are the ones who are always driving it. and that the women are going, in some cases, it's a responsibility. I'm going to do it, but I'm not that bothered. And I know that especially some of the postmenopausal women that I've spoken to and some of the men that I've heard from, it's like, she's not interested anymore. She's saying she doesn't want it. I'm still up for it and things. And I think, well, arousal patterns change in later life. Like, what are you doing to make her feel comfortable?
Yes.
Like, are you expecting that the same old is going to deliver you into the same place, which you've been happy about? But maybe, as you said, your partner is like, thank God I actually have a valid excuse now to say, I don't want to do this anymore. Right. And I think there's a lot of people that I hear from who probably don't really want to acknowledge that that's what's going on, right?
Yep.
And unfortunately for me, I think the bigger issue is, how do you then take this person who probably is quite resentful, who is possibly saying, I'm bored, but doesn't want her husband to hear that because everything else is kind of going good, like they got a nice life. How do you, and I'm speaking now for the man, how do you get him to go, I think that we should do something about this?
Yeah, that's a good one, because that's usually the one that I have to kind of like convince to
drag along, right?
Try something different. Because I think a lot of times the woman in the relationship she's trying different things, or she's saying it. He's not necessarily listening sometimes. But this is where this is probably the time when they're like, okay, we got to do something. And they come to someone like me, who's neutral, I'm not on anybody's side. I just want to see you all have orgasms and be happy, because it makes the world a better place. And so, sometimes when it's something like that, and I'm telling the guy, like, you're gonna have to try something new, and maybe one of the things I use, and this isn't mine, but there is a website. It's I'm trying to think what the name of it is.
It'll come to you afterwards,
it will come to me later.
Share it with me in the second.
But the woman who does it, she was on Love, Sex, and Goop on Netflix, and her name is Jaya, and she did this blueprint and had people take these quizzes and found out where it's kind of like a sexual love language, like where people's sexual love language is. So if you're a person, if you're a guy who's like, I'm the kind of guy who just wants to get to it, have sex, intercourse, get naked, great. But you find out that your partner, or that could be either one, but you're one, and you find out your partner is more kinky. They want to be tied up. They want flogging. They want a little spanking sometimes, or they're sensuous. They want the baths. They want the candles, and you think that's a waste of time. Like, you're looking at it like, why do I have to do all that? We've been married for 5 years. You know how to take a bath, like like, you know what I mean? Like, why do I need to do this? But what you're doing is you're missing out on building up that pleasure level that gets her to the point where she's like, okay, I'm ready to have sex with you, because you've met this need that I have. And so I do that with couples too, because I realize that that's one of the things that it's not necessarily that you're mismatched. Now, the libidos can definitely be off, but it's not necessarily that. It may be just that we're not speaking the same language. Like, I'm not turned on when you walk by and slap me on the ass. I am turned on though when you put handcuffs on me and tie me to the bed.
Yeah, and I think as well that one of the things that struck me is that what I'm hearing from you is that it's often the woman who's like, I want to do something about this. I want us to be in a better place. And she drags the guy along, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's stopping men from just going, you know what, I'll go to this on my own. You know what? I'm hearing you, and I'm hearing what you're saying. You're not interested, but I want to see if we can do something about this. So I'm just going to go on my own and see if I can get some good ideas, and then I'm going to bring them back. And let's see what happens there, right?
I would love to know what's stopping me. Like, I've been doing this for 5 years, And I've
Yeah.
probably had less. I think I've had 9 male clients in 5 years, like that come on their own. They're not being dragged there by a woman. And some
Nice.
of it is, and so some of it is, I don't want to say pride and ego, but some of it is that, and I want to put it in a more positive. I'm going to try to put it in a more positive light. I think what happens is, this is what I've had men tell me in the class. We really aren't taught about sex and pleasure and sexuality at all. It's not like your mom or dad sits you down and is like, this is how you do this, right?
No.
And so you look at porn and you learn really bad habits. And I always tell people, I'm like, I'm not against porn. I am against the habits you learn from porn,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
is you just, you get naked, the woman's hot, everybody's body is super perfect. Like that's just not reality. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you learn that from porn. Porn typically isn't designed to showcase the woman's pleasure and orgasm. Is really designed for the guy's pleasure. So if you're learning sex that way, then you kind of think you got it. And then you couple it with your friends and your uncle or somebody who also doesn't know what they're doing because they learned it from porn. So you have this wonderful mix of knowledge here that you're doing on every single person. And if you never read a book, if
Yeah.
you never take a class, or say, maybe there's just something I don't know and I can learn it, or I need to at least experiment differently with every woman I'm with. I can't do the same thing with Kathy that I did with Renee, that I did with Cole. Like,
Yeah.
at least if you do that, you're more open to it. But I think it's some of that. It's just like, I learned this thing, I think it works. I haven't really checked in to see if it does or not. And nobody complains. So I guess it's all right.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing, is that the nobody checks in, right? The
Yeah.
nobody checks in is the main thing, because if you're not checking in and going, how does this feel? Do you
Yeah.
enjoy this? And you're not, as a woman, comfortable enough to be able to say, well, actually, can you just move your finger a little bit to the left
Yeah.
instead of over to the right? Because the left is the side that I prefer to the right side, right? And I don't know is what's going on with men at the moment, but all the men I've encountered, like in the past, I'd say in the past couple of years, they just all want to make me squirt. This
Oh,
is
that's
it,
the new thing.
right? Like, and no matter how often I tell them that squirting is not an orgasm,
Right.
it feels nice. It's an emission of fluid. It looks kind of cool and kinky.
Right.
And I get all of that. And don't get me wrong, it feels nice, it feels good, but it's not the same as a clitoral orgasm. Like, it doesn't matter how many times I say that. It's like porn has created this stupid idea. And they're like, yeah, but it's good, right? It feels good. I'm like, it feels like having a really good pee,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
like, that's what it feels like. It's not, it's a release. It's quite nice. It looks cool, whatever. I get it. But I personally prefer, like, the stuff that goes on with the little button,
Right.
personally.
Yes.
So just everyone, and I mean, men are learning, and I often thought it was just young men who were learning these terrible habits, but no,
Yeah.
it's all men of all ages that watch porn.
Yeah.
And this sort of thing now, in my youth, no man, can I just tell you, no guy ever tried to make me squirt in my 20s, ever.
No, it wasn't a thing.
Because we didn't have porn. And even in porn, 1970s porn, it wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
But now it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so not only are they learning, like, bad habits, which they think are like, I'm the king, I can do this. But it's like, you don't even know what female pleasures are, it's like,
Yes.
it's reached a real pinnacle for me in how bad this has gotten
Yeah.
in terms of all this. Anytime I'm like, oh God, here we go again. Like I'm gonna make you squirt thing. It's like, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That is the thing. I spend a lot of time going over female pleasure anatomy when I'm working with couples, with men. I teach a whole class on that because I need them to understand like how the female body works and where stuff is and how to massage it. Like I have this thing about like I show them a clitoris. So I have all these props. So I have this prop and I pull it out and I'm like, this is the size. I don't know if I'm gonna find the other, but I have a
We're not
clitoris.
video recording, by the way, so no one's going to see it.
Huh. Oh, you're not doing video. Oh, okay.
No.
So I have this clitoris and like I show people the clitoris and I'm like, it's all of this, right? And I'm like, so you're like, and this thing when you're doing like this DJ thing drives, it's like not, it hurts at some point. So I'm like, please stop rubbing my clit like a DJ. So there's so many things that you can do. So I showed them like, take your 2 fingers and run it down, the inside of the lips of the vulva. Like I go through the whole thing and they're just like, wow, I had no idea. And that's, and it's fine because there's women that don't know that. But it's also, I want to teach them that because I'm like, you're doing things that don't feel good and we're trying to protect your feelings. And so we're not telling you it doesn't feel good. And then we send you out to the next woman unschooled. And that's just wrong. Like, it's just wrong. We're not doing anybody any favors. We're just like, I'm not doing that again, but I'm not going to tell him it was bad. And then he goes to the next girl, does the same thing. And we're like, okay, we got to stop this. So that's another one of my goals. We have to stop this. I need to teach you what this looks like and what you're dealing with so that when you touch it, it feels good to that person.
Exactly. And if it doesn't feel good, that you can ask them, does it feel good? And they say, no, actually, can you do it this way?
Yes.
So Renée, you've said the world needs more sexually satisfied people. What's the connection between individual sexual satisfaction and broader social or emotional well-being?
Oh boy. I really truly believe, like, I know when I was in a sexless relationship, I was mean. Like I got to the point where I was just grouchy. And it's the kind of grouchy where you're like, why is the ice cold? Like you're just that irrational grouchy, right? And so, but I know that when you have sex, you have orgasms, it releases endorphins, it releases oxytocin, which just naturally makes you happier, more pleasant. You have that cuddle hormone. You're getting all this feel good, the dopamine, and so it just makes people nicer people. They're happier, and when they're not. There's definitely people, like, I don't want to negate that there's people who are asexual and they're just totally fine at having sex.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of us who are like, I want to be close to you. And it doesn't always have to be, one of the things I talk about, especially with Gen Xers and baby boomers as we get older, it doesn't always have to be penetrative sex. It can be just pleasure. So it could be oral, it could be massage, it may be a little bit of kink. Like I just did a workshop on that and how kink can be that thing that also brings people to orgasm and brings them pleasure. And so it doesn't have to be just penetration, but we typically as humans need some type of contact, and our bodies were designed for that pleasure. And I find that when people when they're having sex, even if it's with themselves, even if they're masturbating, there's just more they're more in tune with themselves, they're more in tune with their bodies. It makes them more confident, especially when you can talk about what you need. Like there's nothing like telling your partner, this is what I need, and they hear you and listen to you. That gives you that confidence. Like, my partner listened to me. I can tell them this other thing I need, and they're listening to me. And it builds your confidence, which then spills over into your regular life because you're like, okay, I have this confidence to do this. People walk differently when they've had sex. Their skin is brighter. Like it's a whole thing. So
yeah. I mean, somebody once asked me a few years ago, they were like, oh, I hate it when people are like, oh, you look young for your age and all that stuff. But somebody said something to me and they're like, oh, I didn't think you were that old. Like, what's your secret? And I went, oh, I just get laid a lot.
It's a great answer. I'm definitely going to say that.
Makes you happy and keeps your skin looking good. So we're coming up to our closing thing. What's the most rewarding part of your work as the Gen Sexologist?
Oh man. I think I think the most rewarding part is working with men or working with a couple who that it's something unlocks for them. And it's like I just talked about the clitoris. Like they see that and they're like, oh. Or I show them a toy, or I show them some type of technique. Like I like floggers, and so I'll show them like, you don't have to like whip the person, but you can use it to just kind of drag it across their skin, and it creates this sensation. I love when people expand their toolbox for sex. Like that really gets me going, because I'm like, okay, they're out of just the missionary and doggy style. They're thinking there's all this stuff I can do to please my partner. So that's probably my best part. And I love working with men who come in and want to learn more about a woman's body. Like I lay it all out. I'm like, let me tell you everything. Like
Listen, we should do, I'll tell you what we should do. You just inspired me. What we should do is like a little webinar, right? You probably already do this, right? Which is like sex advice for seniors, understanding a woman's body 101, right? So like here, and you've got your little clitoris toy and everything, and you're like,
I've got a whole
arsenal full of stuff.
Whole arsenal that I'm planning to do that, because I actually am thinking that maybe more men would take the class if it were on demand, and not like they could just take it when they want to, and they don't have to tell people like, I don't want to tell people I don't know what I'm doing. But I get it. Like if that's kind of the male culture, like I'm supposed to know, and you don't know, then where do you go to find out?
I mean, look, we could do understanding a man's body 101 as well at the same time. I mean, like I didn't, it took me a long time to work out like all the different parts of the penis and everything, and like all the different, pleasure places on it and everything. So I think, it's not only men that don't understand about women. No. I think it works both ways. It's just that we've got a lot more stuff going on that's relatively confusing, whereas I think that women think that men's penises are fairly straightforward. And, I suspect they're kind of right, but ours are confusing. We got all, we got the inside, we got the outside. It's all, I understand the fact that they get confused, but the fact, as you said, they don't really seek out any information. That's for me the big problem. It's like, if you're confused, read a book, right?
There's places to go that's not porn, that you can find out if you feel like, I don't know if she's having an orgasm or not. Like, I just want people to like look at porn for inspiration. Like, okay, this is your role play scenario. But when it gets to like, oh, as soon as I see her, she's hot and ready to go, I'm like, yeah, that's not how most women work.
Yeah, it's not going to work. Anyway, Renée, enjoy yourself in Washington. I don't know how.
It's still a beautiful city.
It's a beautiful city. Just turn off the news and
I'm trying to read more books and do more stuff like this, and it takes my mind off of it.
Yeah, it's been lovely to talk to you.
You too, Suzanne.